Ukraine's state emergency service shows a huge blast in the northwest suburbs of the city. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has said shelling hit residential houses and a shopping district. He has since announced a 35-hour curfew in Kyiv from tonight. The UK's Ministry of Defence says Russian forces advancing on the city have stalled and the bulk of soldiers remain more than 25 kilometres away. State media in China are reporting there are no sign of survivors from an airliner that crashed in the country with 132 people on board. The Boeing 737 jet crashed into mountains in the southern province of Guangxi, causing a fire on the mountainside. Media have quoted firefighters as saying there was no sign of life among the scattered debris. There are no reports as of yet as to what may have caused the plane to crash. Downing Street has blamed Russia for being behind hoax calls which targeted senior members of the UK cabinet. The Home Secretary and Defence Secretary both spoke to imposters posing as the Ukrainian Prime Minister, while an unsuccessful attempt was also made to Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary. It's thought the attempts were made in the hope of securing sensitive or embarrassing information. The family of London student Sabita Thawani have paid tribute to their beautiful, irreplaceable angel. The 19-year-old was found dead at student accommodation in Clerkenwell in central London on Saturday morning. Her family said they pray for a day when girls and women are safe. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of her murder. Vulnerable people in England will begin receiving invitations for the spring COVID booster jab today. Those over 75 and/or who are immunosuppressed will be able to book themselves in, whilst local NHS teams will contact care homes to arrange the jab for those who are eligible. It's being made available to around 5 million people, with 600,000 expected to receive invitations in the first week. Physical punishment of a child, including smacking, slapping and shaking, is now officially illegal in Wales. From today, anyone responsible for a child can face charges if found to have physically disciplined a young person in any way. Marking the end of the reasonable punishment defence, it means children will now get the same protection from assault as adults. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's return to On the Money.
And welcome to a whole new week of On the Money. Coming up on today's show, over 1 million people are in debt to illegal, unregulated loan sharks, over 3 times more than previously thought, according to new research out today. As the cost of living squeeze bites, more and more cash-strapped households will turn to the illegal, unregulated loan sharks. Why are we putting up with Victorian-era lending practices in modern Britain? We discuss also the P&O Ferries scandal. The iconic company's Dubai owners have laid off hundreds of workers via a pre-recorded Zoom call, replacing them with cheaper labour. We discuss the legality of these layoffs and why it is that the government may need to keep the company's owners sweet. And as ever, an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today with a working-class girl made good, now a noted business strategist. It's a fascinating story later in the show. And as ever, I want to hear about your experiences and concerns. Have you used a loan shark? Did you have any problems? Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. Stay with us. This is GB News on TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. I'm Liam Halligan. You're on the money. Now, over 1 million people in the UK are currently in debt to loan sharks. And of course, as the cost of living squeeze tightens, the number of stretched households using illegal money lenders so they can pay essential bills is only likely to rise. The Centre for Social Justice has found that around 2.4% of the population, almost 1.1 million, have admitted they're borrowing money, quotes, from someone local who charges interest. In other words, an unregulated, illegal lender. The CSJ survey suggests some loan sharks use brutal techniques, doling out psychological and even physical abuse on borrowers, and, in the most extreme cases, demanding sexual favours. The CSJ report Swimming the Shark says Britain is a nation of money secrets. 2 in 5 of us confessed in a recent survey to concealing a financial product from a loved one, such as a credit card or loan. But despite how ubiquitous it is to disguise our financial situation, some hidden debts are worse than others. In England today, we estimate that as many as 1.08 million people are borrowing from an illegal moneylender, more commonly known as a loan shark. That's over 700,000 more people than the most recent official estimate. This CSJ research was based on a poll of around 4,000 adults. The report told of single mums paying triple-digit rates of interest, with some borrowers paying back more than 5 or even 6 times the size of the original loan. And a truly shocking 10% of borrowers said cash-rich loan sharks forced them to provide sexual favours for loans if they defaulted. The UK is meant to be a lawful, decent society. So why are we still blighted by, frankly, Victorian-era illegal, unregulated moneylenders? A problem set to worsen as the cost of living squeeze gets tighter. And that's our On the Money question today. When will the UK be rid of exploitative loan sharks? Grown-up conversation with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. Talking of which, I'm joined by Baroness Ros Altman, former Pensions Minister. Great to have you with you. Great to have you with us, Ros, as ever. Here in the studio, we have Matthew Greenwood, acting head of debt for the Centre for Social Justice, the respected Westminster-based think tank who carried out this research. And he's back. It's Justin Urquhart-Stewart, a man for all seasons, co-founder of Regionally. Great to have your financial expertise with us, Justin, on this important topic, which I know is also an issue for you. But before we get this discussion going, we're going to talk to someone else. We're going to talk to an anonymous person by phone. She is Helen. She's a community worker, and she has a lot of experience of working with people who are victims of loan sharks. Helen, I hope you can hear me. I know you don't want to reveal your identity, and we respect that because you have to deal with some pretty shady characters. You will have had a look at this CSJ research. You will have seen this think tank really putting its finger on the use of unregulated illegal workers, lenders, I should say. How big an issue is this across modern Britain?
What we're going to do is... Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can. Just let me... I can hear you on my telephone. Can you just repeat the question again?
I tell you what, we'll sort out those comms issues and we'll come back to Helen, because we definitely want to get input from Helen, who's been working with families who are victims of loan sharks. Let's just speak, first of all, to the CSJ. Let's speak to Matthew Greenwood. Tell us what motivated this research, what you found, and how surprised you are by it.
Well, at the Centre for Social Justice, we have an alliance of regional charities. These are small guys on the ground that have their finger to the pulse. And for a very long time, we've heard about these hidden debts to shady local figures who can't really be accounted for. And that's why we sought to look into this. And we found that up to 1 million people across England could be borrowing from an illegal moneylender.
That's amazing. And the report talks about really usurious rates of interest. There's no other word for it, really. I can't be polite about it. Completely exploitative rates of interest, with people paying back 4, 5, 6 times the size of the original loan, and in some cases being subject to psychological, even physical abuse.
Well, absolutely. And I think the thing that struck me throughout the research is that a lot of the victims of this crime are highly vulnerable. And loan sharks will target those people because they know they're people that they can manipulate for further repayment. We found that almost 2/3 had an income of below £20,000. Most have a debt to a legal creditor, and an awful lot have a disability of some kind. And the worst part of all is that these people go to try and find legal credit, and when they do, they are rejected.
Yeah. The financial service industry fails them, in other words.
Yes, and that means that they have to turn to someone who usually they consider a friend. And the betrayal of that friendship by someone who is posing to be something they are not can be devastating.
Some people call these doorstep loans or payday loans, don't they? It's all the same thing. We call it the kind of twilight lending industry because it's unregulated, it's therefore illegal, and people can really get into trouble.
Well, doorstop and payday lenders are something very different. We saw a whole host of high-cost credit providers, Provident, Wonga, who have left the market, or that they were regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. What we're talking about is something different. We're talking about local figures in the area who are known to lend money. They're not a company. They're a person who is conducting a consumer credit business without a licence, and they're exploiting vulnerable people.
Justin, let's turn to you. Back in the day, I talked about the Victorian era there, but during the Victorian era, where obviously there was a lot more poverty in the UK, though of course there is absolute poverty in the UK today.
Yes,
let's not beat around the bush, and there's likely to be a lot more over the coming months as inflation lets rip. But back in the day, there would be credit unions, there would be cooperative movements, there'd be self-help societies, sometimes based around a church, but not always based around a church, where poorer, more vulnerable households would pool their money to help each other out on a rainy day at very low or even no rates of interest. Yep. This is the complete inverse.
And it was astonishing how these were developed at that time. You would have thought, actually, surely they would be developing now. They're right at the Victorian times when people really were in severe trouble. These credit unions and other elements, these saving clubs, got to and worked very effectively indeed. Now, the issue is, they're still there. There are still good credit unions around. But we don't educate anybody in this country about this. People go through school, they're not taught about finance at all, or where to go. And so when they get rejected by banks and any other facilities, where else do they go?
Yeah.
And they ended up going to this.
They go to the bloke in the pub who happens to be a loan shark.
Absolutely.
Who's posing as their friend and then manipulates them and charges them ridiculous rates of interest. They can't go to the cops because it's illegal anyway.
Yeah, but the credit unions are there. But who's heard of them? Actually, when you scratch the surface, there are quite a few of them around, but they don't get any profile. And they're good for savings. They're good for borrowing. You join them and actually, these are regular savings clubs, a bit like the ones you've had for years, like the old Christmas clubs. But even they can be dangerous sometimes. If you educated more people about, look, here are some alternatives, it doesn't solve the problem, but it gives people at least an understanding what they've got, but also educate them about the debt compounding. You start off with that amount and how it grows over time, very quickly indeed. So what was £100 suddenly turned into something really very frightening, and then you're terrified. What do you do?
Let's turn to Baroness Ros Altman. Baroness, great to have you on the show. For viewers and listeners who don't know who Ros Altman is, Ros came to prominence back in the day when she was a financial services professional and an academic who began fighting for the pension rights of workers in collapsed final salary pension schemes, somebody who I've known for many years, somebody of genuine financial expertise and social conscience. Ros, what can we do about this situation? I know you'll have had a look at this CSJ research. I know you've been looking at this problem for a long time. Can we tighten up the law in this area to stop people being victimised?
Well, it is really difficult. And I think I agree with Justin that actually education for people and helping them understand that there are places they can go which aren't extortionate would be really helpful. But the government can facilitate that sort of thing. For some people, they will get help in the workplace if they ask their bosses. And unfortunately, people are a bit frightened to admit that they've got into debt and therefore don't always go to their maybe company HR facility. Some companies are trying to introduce low-cost loan facilities in the workplace, deducted from salary. All those things are great. There's been great progress. My fear is that with the cost of living crisis that we are already in and is getting worse, there is going to be an increase in the number of people who max out their credit cards. And credit card debt isn't cheap debt, by the way, either. There'll be an increase in the number of people looking desperately for somewhere to go to get a bit of extra money just to pay basic bills. And that's where the real danger lies. So I think helping people, advertising properly, maybe even government-funded adverts, but certainly perhaps industry-funded adverts to help people understand where they can go to get help if they are in debt before they are enticed into this egregious debt facility that a loan shark might offer them. I think that is something that we really need to consider. We've got to wake up. You know, this is a real cost of living crisis. People's wages are not going up enough to meet the rise in the cost of living. And the other problem you have is for older people. If they are hitting hard times, and not all older people have got great pensions to live on, many are just trying to make do with the state pension, they find that they can't even necessarily get extra credit card debt. Because the credit card companies sometimes have age limits. Again, they will be very vulnerable, and we need to find ways to reach out to them. There are debt advice services, there are charities there to help people. The credit unions could offer a great facility, but at the moment, not enough people really know where to turn.
You get the sense, Ros, that as this big increase in utility bills comes in April, an increase that was penciled in even before the Russia-Ukraine war led wholesale oil and gas prices to spike and food prices to go up and so on. I do sense that loan sharks are circling, because there will be many vulnerable families who will need to, or will feel that they need to borrow money from somewhere, and maybe they are maxed out on their credit cards. But stay with us. This is On the Money. We will keep this important discussion going on after the break with our expert panel. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast on this one. We'll read out some of those shortly. So stay with us. You're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We're talking about loan sharks, illegal, unregulated lenders on the prowl in Britain, charging huge rates of interest, often to vulnerable households. Let's go back to Ros Altman, Baroness Ros Altman, who is a financial expert. Ros, you will have sat through many debates in the House of Lords on this issue. What can we do to try and make it less likely that people are going to fall foul of loan sharks and end up in trouble, subject to psychological, even physical abuse or worse by people who are operating beyond the law when lending money?
Well, I certainly think there needs to be better awareness on the part of the public of what to do if they are coming under that kind of pressure. There needs to be police protection, and if people are reporting that somebody is pressurizing them in these dreadful ways, I mean, when you talk about threats of physical or sexual violence, for example. You know, those kind of things are criminal.
I think we've. Justin, I think we've lost Roz's sound there. I do apologise to viewers and listeners for the sound issues we're having today.
One of the issues that actually has come about here is that people have had a sense of pride, and so therefore they don't want to admit
Roz touched on that, and indeed the CSJ report touched on that. We are quite secretive about money in the UK, aren't we? Oh, you never talk about money. It's not like that in the States or even in some continental countries.
And you get embarrassed by it, and you don't want to admit to people. And the number of people I come across, and these aren't necessarily poor people, these are sort of glorious middle class, they got themselves stuck into it, and they didn't know what to do. Two things we could actually do here is actually encourage more family issues here. To actually say across the generation, what can you try and do to help each other? And actually make sure the family is going to be okay to get through difficult times, particularly the youngsters coming to maybe go to the big city for the first time. And also in the community. Who in your community can you actually try and help? And this will be particularly important when you're dealing with, say, the energy bills coming through.
Indeed.
You know,
we know they're coming in April.
They're coming through. So, talk to your neighbours and actually sit there and say, no, what's it like? Perhaps can I help with this at all? And at least discuss it. And you may not be able to give them money for it, but at least help them with it, because they're going to be frightened and they don't know what to do.
And that's the key difference from sort of historic periods. Back in the early 20th century, people knew they were poor. They were in it together, so they had that kind of solidarity. Let's just go back to Ros Altman. Ros, please do finish off what you're saying. I'm sorry that we lost comms with you, Ros. Just finish off what you wanted to say, please.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Ros. Just a final word from you before you go. I'm sorry that we lost communications with you.
What I want to get across is that we need people to report these criminals to the authorities, to the police, and make sure that anyone who is threatening you is dealt with. I know people are frightened to go and report things. They may be able to report something at work. They may be able to report something to their benefit office.
OK, we lost Ros's sound again. So let's go now to Kath. Can we go to Kath Williams, who's the liaison manager at the England Illegal Money Lending Unit, which is a kind of quasi-government unit working independently but under the auspices of the Treasury and funded by a levy on the financial services industry. Kath Williams, thanks so much for joining us to discuss this important research by CSJ. This is a subject that doesn't often get out of the shadows, but can you give us your sense of the extent to which the UK has a problem with loan sharks?
I think it's a really difficult one to quantify, and I think the CSJ report's done a fabulous job with the figure they've come up with. But it's such an underreported crime. It's such a hard thing for people to talk about. We know people don't like talking about debt, and this is often the very last debt people will admit to.
Tell us about some of the things that you've heard of happening in terms of abuse meted out to people, in terms of the usurious rates of interest that people are charged, often triple and even quadruple digit over many years.
We've been able to evidence in the past interest rates in excess of 130,000% APR equivalent. I remember one gentleman I worked with who had borrowed £250 and he paid back £90,000 over a 17-year period. But what happens is loan sharks, they don't just charge interest, they add indiscriminate charges. So quite often you miss one payment, they'll double what you owe. And we're even seeing loan sharks now where they're not lending people money, they're renting it to you. So I will rent you £2,000 at £200 a month. But you're paying me £200 a month and that £2,000 isn't going down. You still owe me £2,000 because you're just renting the debt. You didn't borrow it. You're not paying it back. And in terms of the threats, it varies. There is a spectrum of illegal lending. We do see at one end hideous, threats of violence and sexual violence as well. But also an awful lot more loan sharks will use more coercive control methods. So it's all about what I could do. It's all implicit. It's all about isolating people. So it's saying things like, I lend money to your neighbour Tracy. And if you don't pay me back, I can't lend Tracy any money this week and I'll have to tell Tracy why. Your partner doesn't know about this debt. Wouldn't it be terrible if you found out just before your birthday? And it sort of spirals from there. I know where you work. Wouldn't it be awful if I sat outside your workplace and you had to explain to your boss what I was doing there? And then it carries on and carries on. It's text messages 24 hours a day. It's Facebook messages. It's Facebook posts. And it just eats away at people's self-esteem so they feel even more isolated than they did when they started.
Absolute psychological torture, Kath. Let's go back to our community worker, Helen, who wants to remain anonymous. I'm sorry about those communications problems earlier, Helen. Helen, you work with lots of people who are using loan sharks. Can you tell us your experience from the front line, as it were?
Yeah, my experience is I work in an area of multi-deprivation, and very often the people who use a loan shark don't even know that they're using a loan shark, because the loan sharks very often use a befriending approach before they go into lending money. So they'll be in the community and they make friends with them. They might buy them little gifts, might take them out for a meal, take them somewhere in car, and then offer them money. And that's where that kind of cycle begins. And very often people never end up paying the whole debt off. They're paying it off forever. And I think, as has been mentioned before, they do live in fear. They live in fear of being threatened themselves, but the families are threatened as well. So it really does have an awful effect on their lives. And the people who can't go anywhere else to borrow money, so the only people they can borrow it off is the loan sharks.
Helen, the CSJ report has, it was in-depth research. You know that CSJ has a really extensive network of charities that it works with. The survey evidence suggests that some really unfortunate people are being forced to grant lenders sexual favours. Is that something that you've heard of?
That's something we've heard of, yeah. They've sexual favours, they've had the bank cards taken off them, so if they do need any money for anything else, they have to go to the lenders to actually ask for their money back. We hear some real horror stories, and a lot of it doesn't get reported. People are afraid to go to the police or authorities, and it's very often people like me who are in there on the ground who people feel engaged with, and they'll come and start to talk to me about it. Not a great deal, because it's something that does go under the radar.
Helen, really astonishing testimony. I want to give Matt Greenwood of the CSJ, the organisation that fronted this research, the last word. But let's quickly go back to Kath Williams, if I may. Kath, again, is from the England Illegal Money Lending Unit, which is a semi-official body funded by a levy on the financial services industry. Kath, do you see any sign of movement within government in terms of trying to put in extra safeguards? Everyone now realises, even the political and media class, if I may say so, that this is a cost of living crisis. It's going to get worse before it gets better. What sort of measures do you think we need to try and protect the kind of people that Helen's just been talking about?
I think it's so multifaceted, it's untrue. I think we need education in schools. I think it needs to be a thing in the curriculum that kids learn about budgeting. They learn about credit. They learn where you do get money from, where you don't get money from. I think, we're an enforcement team. We have the power to arrest loan sharks and remove them from communities. But an awful lot of what we do is preventative work. We're desperately trying to get people to use credit unions, to save a little bit when they can, to get a little bit of financial resilience, and then to borrow affordably from credit unions. I think there's a whole host of stuff that can go on around that, but I think the big thing is talking about it. And if as the lady said before, if we can do that, if as communities we can have those conversations, then the loan sharks lose their power, because their power is in people not talking about it.
Absolutely, well put. Matt, you've been listening patiently to this debate. Your research has been completely vindicated and stood up, as we say, in journalism. What's the next step?
Well, I think that the government needs to think about what it's immediately going to do to remedy the cost of living crisis. We're hearing good noises out of the Treasury regarding a cut in fuel duty, but there's also an opportunity to reduce the amount the universal credit claws back, and the universal credit is the best means of getting money to those on the lowest incomes right now. But not only do we need to do that, we need to urgently renew the fight against illegal money lending. This is something that, as our research has shown, takes place across England. And we need to clamp down on illegal lenders, we need to protect the most vulnerable, and we need to provide the alternative.
And we need to talk about it, above all. Matt Greenwood of CSJ, congratulations on the research that you've done. You've certainly just sparked a debate here in the On the Money studio and elsewhere, I'm sure. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, thanks for joining us. Kath Williams of the Illegal Money Lending Unit, thank you for your work. And also Helen, the community worker. I will be inviting you back on the show for a longer discussion. As you say, it's a very complex issue. And, of course, the Baroness Ros Ortman. And if you've been affected by illegal money lending and you need support, call the Stop the Loan Sharks 24-hour helpline on 0300 555 2222 or visit their website www.stoploansharks.co.uk. And if you are struggling, a Samaritan could help you through. Do not forget the Samaritans are there. They are always there. They provide an astonishingly valuable service. Call the Samaritans helpline for free on 0116 123. So thank you to all our guests today. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Stay with us, because coming up, we're bringing you the latest on the P&O employment scandal. How can existing workers be forced out and replaced with others who are cheaper? Can you do that in the UK? And today's Money Talks interview is with Lisa Johnson, a successful female business strategist and anti-bullying campaigner, a working-class girl made good. It's a fascinating story. All that after the GB News headlines with Simon Pusey.
Hello, it's 1:34. I am Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. A man on trial for the murder of MP Sir David Amess has researched and planned potential attacks on other politicians, including cabinet ministers, and a court has heard. The Conservative MP for Southend West was meeting with constituents in a church building in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex last October when he was fatally stabbed. Ali Harbi Ali has appeared at the Old Bailey and denies the allegations of murder and preparing terrorist acts. Well, GB News' home and security editor Marc White joins us now from central London. Marc, what was heard in court?
Well, it's just over 5 months since Sir David Amess was stabbed to death inside that Methodist church in Leigh-on-Sea as he was carrying out this constituency meeting. And now the man accused of his murder, 26-year-old Ali Harbi Ali, is in the dock here at court number 2 at the Old Bailey, accused of the murder of this Conservative MP and also planning acts of terrorism. Now, these preparation for terrorism acts are alleged to have taken place over several years and included preparations to attack not just Sir David Amess but also researching with a view to attacking other Conservative MPs, including the Tory MP Mike Freer and the Cabinet Minister Michael Gove as far back as May 2019. Now, Tom Little QC for the prosecution has been setting out the events of that day on the 15th of October last year when Sir David Amess was stabbed to death. He said that the defendant had left his home in Kentish Town to make the journey down to Leigh-on-Sea to carry out this attack. Tom Little told the jury this was nothing less than an assassination for terrorist purposes. It is a crime to which we say he has no defence. He went on to say, this is a case involving a cold and calculated murder, a murder carried out in a place of worship, a murder carried out because of a warped and twisted and violent ideology. With regard to that motive, after stabbing Sir David Amess a number of times, he allegedly shouted, according to Tom Little QC, that this was as a direct result of the bombing of Syria. The trial is now continuing with this opening statement by the prosecution.
Marc live there from the Old Bailey, and we'll have updates from Marc throughout the trial. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. It's 1:38. Now, the Labour Party's forcing an emergency vote in Parliament today following that sacking of 800 P&O ferry workers. Staff were made redundant without warning, effective immediately, in a move the Chancellor called awful and wrong. The operator replaced staff with cheaper agency workers. And in a statement, P&O Ferries said, "We took this difficult decision as a last resort and only after full consideration of all other options, but ultimately we concluded the business wouldn't survive without fundamentally changed crewing arrangements, which in turn would inevitably result in redundancies." Now, GB News reporter Ellie Costello joins us from Westminster, where a protest is mustering. It kicks off later this afternoon. People are already milling around in the background. Ellie, I'm sure you've been talking to protesters. What is the mood?
Well, there's certainly a lot of tension here, Liam. We're outside the DP World offices in Victoria in London. You can see them just about to mobilise now. They're about to head down to Westminster, where Labour will be forcing a vote on how to deal with P&O, how to deal with the parent company of P&O, which is the Dubai-based DP World. We're outside their headquarters now. And it is going to be a very interesting development here, Liam, because there is an emerging split between the Tory party on how to handle this crisis and how to handle DP World. So as you just heard there, Labour will be calling for the Conservatives to vote with them to do three things this afternoon. The first is to outlaw fire and rehire contracts. That's what we're seeing taking place at the moment. British workers have been sacked on the spot via Zoom in a pre-recorded message, and foreign workers, agency workers, have been brought on reportedly for $2 an hour. They will also be asking for DP World to have all of its contracts suspended, and thirdly for DP World to be removed from the Transport Advisory Group. Now, Liam, it's that second point that could be a point of contention in the Tory party, and that is because DP World is heavily involved in government projects, including two Freeport plans. And the Labour Party and the RMT union, which is behind me now, are calling for all projects to be scrapped in response to how P&O have treated its workers. And Robert Courts, Maritime Minister, has said they will be looking at all contracts that may exist. Similar tone from Kwasi Kwarteng. He's asking for answers on his desk at 5 p.m. tomorrow. But in odds with all of that is Chancellor Rishi Sunak. He says that, yes, the way that P&O have treated their workers is appalling, but he doesn't think that DP World, their parent company, should be blocked from other contracts. He thinks the two are separate issues, and that is a really important point of contention, Liam. And this is the issue. DP World has invested heavily in London and Southampton's free ports, £300 million. A big player in the Southampton free port, 25,000 jobs in Southampton, 21,000 jobs in London. These are huge employers and huge investors. And one of the Tory backbenchers in Southampton, Royston Smith, has said that he's worried that Labour could be jumping the gun and putting Southampton jobs at risk. It's certainly an interesting development, Liam, and we will be seeing those voices this afternoon in Westminster.
Well, Ellie, characteristically, you've really pinpointed the issue there. We see the RMT flags behind you. That's the maritime union that represents a lot of these workers who have been made redundant. And, of course, a lot of government members want to sympathise with workers who've been made redundant in such a high-handed way. But at the same time, the government's doing business with DP World, the Dubai-based financiers that are basically part of the UAE government. It's big money, and that free ports project, tax-free ports across the UK that are possible under Brexit, that's one of Rishi Sunak's pet projects. It'll be interesting to see how all this develops. Ellie Costello there in Westminster as that protest at the redundancy of 800 P&O workers gathers pace. We'll be coming back to that later on GB News. Joining me now to delve a little bit deeper into this, which is what we do here on The Money, is Beverley Sunderland. She's Managing Director at Crossland Employment Solicitors. She specialises in employment law. Beverley, I don't want to question the legality of this because I wouldn't be able to do that and DP World deny all wrongdoing. But can you then explain the legality of this to me?
Yes, afternoon, Liam. And I think all of our sympathies go out to all of these P&O staff who've been affected by this. But essentially, one thing that is really important to take away from this discussion is that these people work on ships. And there are specific rules that apply as seafarers, and it will depend where they are badged. So, for instance, as I understand it, most of their ships are badged in Jersey, and because of that, they are likely to be dealt with under Jersey law. But there are certain things that they should have done. For instance, consulted with the unions at a formative stage before a decision was made, consult for 45 days, apply fair and objective selection criteria. I mean, the list goes on, but it is all going to depend on the kind of employment that they have, where the ship is badged, and what laws they fall under. Now, I know people who know people, as they say, and I've managed to get my hands on a P&O Ferries agreement, collective agreement that relates primarily to the Irish Sea. But in that, they talk about minimum requirements, the fact that they will abide by UK law, that they will submit to the UK employment law jurisdiction, but whether they will or not, of course, remains to be seen.
Very interesting, Beverley. Without wishing to set hairs running, and you're the expert, not me, but am I right in saying that if you're employed under what's called the Maritime Labour Convention, the usual laws of the land, in this case the UK, don't apply to your contract? Is that roughly right?
Well, the Marine Labour Convention was set up and 100 countries all came together to ratify it. And what that was intended to do was to put in place minimum obligations in terms of how much people get paid, their minimum living accommodation and things like that. But if they are actually seafarers, then they are excluded from a lot of the UK legislation on minimum notice and things like that. And that's why it's not something that you can just give a quick answer to, because it's going to be dependent on so many moving parts.
That's really, really interesting. Well, Beverly, it's great to talk to you, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future as this situation develops. It is a politically complex situation. I do think it's going to stay in the news, given the outrage at how some of these workers were removed. Beverly Sunderland there, employment lawyer from Crossland Employment Solicitors. Thanks so much for your time. And now it's my daily interview series, Money Talks, and today I'm talking to Lisa Johnson. After a tough childhood spent in social housing, Lisa's a huge believer that everyone can become a success no matter their background. She's built a successful career as a business strategist, a business coach. She's also an ambassador for the charity Bullies Out. So here she is, Lisa Johnson, my latest guest on Money Talks. Lisa, great to have you here in the studio on Money Talks. We were just talking in the break, weren't we? And you were watching the previous item about loan sharks and people getting into trouble. And you said that that's something that you've experienced in your previous life.
Yeah, I think so many of us had. I had twins. I had really young twins. I'd gone through a divorce and I didn't have the money to pay just the basic bills. And so for me at that time, all I was seeing was loan sharks saying, well, you can have it really easily. We can give you this money really easily. And when you need the money, you need the money. And so I was getting loan after loan after loan. And it meant that I ended up £30,000 in debt. And the APR on those debts were huge. The
rate of interest.
Yeah, it was just massive. And so when I was paying it back, obviously I was paying back so much more than I had borrowed, and it was so hard. Even though I was trying to pay it off with what I was getting paid, I was never getting to the bottom of it.
How were you treated?
Though I was a number.
Were you psychologically, do you think there was, we heard of some really horrendous things happening.
Yeah.
So people who get really in debt in terms of physical abuse. Perhaps it didn't come to that.
It didn't come to that. I was getting a letter.
Felt tormented.
Yeah, letter after letter after letter. If you don't pay, we'll do this. If you don't pay, we'll do this. And it is scary. I'm lucky that I had done a law degree earlier on in my career, and so I kind of knew the tactics that were used. But yeah, it wasn't an easy time.
So you grew up from humble beginnings in Lincolnshire. You got yourself a law degree. Didn't mean you weren't subject to financial issues when you had your small kids and you'd been, unfortunately, divorced. How did you turn your life around to build Lisa Johnson's Strategy? It's, a well-known strategy company in the business sphere. What was it about you that made you do that?
I think necessity. So I didn't get my law degree until much later in life, and I got it while working full-time as a PA.
That's tough.
It was tough, but I had to do something to try and get me, out of the position I was in. But even when I did that, there were no jobs because there were so many people going for these law degrees, and I was a mum of two kids. And so I was a PA, and I knew that I was going to have to save myself. There was no one's going to come and help me. I was going to have to save myself.
Lovely picture of your kids there up on the screen for people watching on television and online. I guess that's your real motivation, right?
It is my motivation, and I knew that I needed to do something, but I didn't really know what. And then I decided to start a business. And so my first business was a wedding planning business. I just chose it because I thought, why not? It sounded fun. But I made every mistake that you can possibly make. I didn't know anyone that had been in business, so I was just kind of like winging it as I went along and learning. And I ended up, at the end of the first year of that business, realising that I wasn't doing very well. I was making £1.15 an hour in that business. I was never going to be able to leave my 9-to-5 PA job to spend time with my twins. And so I decided to learn everything that I could. I made this decision. I'm either going to have to live hand to mouth, always be in debt, same as generations before me, or I'm going to have to learn everything I can and turn this around. So I went to every free webinar online, I read every business book I could get my hand on, and eventually I turned that business around. And then people started asking me, how have you done this? How did you start your business? And I started just telling them the things that I had learned. And I seemed to have a knack for telling them it without the jargon and without the complications, just do this, this and this. And so then, about 5 years ago, I realised that if I was really going to clear this debt, I needed to do this properly. And so I went all in and said, right, I am now a business strategist. I'm going to help people with their business strategy. And started helping first hundreds, then thousands of people make money online, just using the knowledge that they already have in their head.
A lot of it is just having the confidence to start, isn't it?
Yeah.
And having the confidence to say to people, oh, you can't do that. That thinking, well, actually, I can. It's kind of a determination, isn't it? A kind of stubbornness. Now, I know you wouldn't describe yourself as a particularly exceptional person, yet you've done it. So what would you say to people who are thinking, you know what, I want to do what Lisa's doing. I want to take control of my life and try and build a business that means I have the freedom to be the mum, the dad, the brother or sister, to be the person that I really want to be.
Because that's what it's all about, right? Like, if we really think about this, it's because do we want to spend all of our time working until we die? Or do we want to find a way that we're not trading time for money and we're actually spending time with our kids? And I think the reason that I was able to do it is because I had a tough childhood. I think that when you have obstacles in your life, when you start a business, things go wrong. It's not easy having a business. And if you've never had those obstacles, you're likely to go, oh, well, I tried, it didn't work for me. But if you've been through obstacles, whether it's illness, financial obstacles, I was bullied really badly in school, then I think you're more likely to say, okay, it's an obstacle, but I've had obstacles before. I can go round. I'll find a way through.
But we all know it's easier if you come from money, your parents can lend to you, your relatives can lend to you. If you come from a privileged background, you know, you've got the people you need to talk to sort of wafting through your living room anyway. You had none of that.
No.
You had none of that. Didn't you get a bit narc sometimes that you saw other people getting ahead because they had lots and lots of advantages you didn't have? Or did you use that as a sort of motivation?
I did use it as a motivation, but I will say I did used to feel like, oh, it's OK for her because, it's OK for him because.
But you don't get anywhere thinking that, do you?
No, you have to switch that mindset to, well, actually, I can do this.
Why not me?
And I had to look for other people who had come from backgrounds like me.
Role models.
To say, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And it's why I'm so visible online now, because I want to show people that if I could, they can. And we don't have to be in this position. We can really try and change things, turn things around. And even if we're just adding a little bit of money per month, that can really, really relieve things. And during the coronavirus, the pandemic, I had thousands of people coming to me saying, I no longer have any work. I can no longer support myself. People who were in businesses, people who were in jobs, and we had to find a way to help them to earn money. And so that's what we did.
One brief answer at the end. We're up against time limits, which is a shame because I could talk to you for a long time, Lisa. It's very interesting. You're a businesswoman. Business people, they tend to have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the economy. This cost of living crisis, how concerned are you?
I am concerned, but I know that if we pull together, we can do things about it for ourselves. What I do think we need to do is stop relying on a government to bail us out of things. We're going to have to do it ourselves. No one's coming to rescue us.
Lisa Johnson, really good to talk to you. Thanks a lot for appearing on Money Talks, and all the best with your business and best to your children.
Thank you very much.
Lisa Johnson there. What an inspiring character. As ever here on The Money, we bring you interesting people to hear from. And before we finish the show, talking about hearing from interesting people, here are some of your emails on the loan shark debt. Marianne says, schools should concentrate on educating children on budgeting and general finance. Young people go out into the world without understanding the pitfalls of the consequences of using credit cards or loan sharks. Hear to that. Lee emailed us to say the only way to rid our country of loan sharks is to jail them and to wipe the loan for borrowers. They will not bother to go into business if they're automatically prosecuted and lose their money. I like that idea. I think I might take that up. Keep your emails coming. We appreciate them. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me here on The Money. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. and then with a On The Money special, 11 till 5 p.m. on the Spring Statement on Wednesday. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A cloudier day compared to what many of us saw at the weekend, but staying bright and dry for most of us, and it will be a little warmer in the south as well. Areas of cloud are moving in from the west and from the south. That cloud thick enough in one or two spots to give the odd shower, for example, through parts of Wales and the Midlands. But for the vast majority, it's dry. Despite the extra cloud in the sky, it's bright and temperatures higher in the south compared to the weekend, 15 to 17 or even 18 Celsius, Cardiff to London. I think more like low teens further north for Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Then through the evening, a few showers arriving from the south. they'll be very hit and miss. Most places will miss them, and they'll be fleeting anyway where they do occur. Away from the showers, there'll be a few clear spells, especially towards the northeast where a touch of frost is possible, and 1 or 2 fog patches in 1 or 2 spots as we start off Tuesday. But otherwise, it stays fine. High pressure is sitting to the east.